The lights dim gently. Welcome to the dimmed light. Are you ready for a calm journey? Take a deep breath, relax. The world inside the stone chamber is still, held in a suspension of time that belongs neither to the night nor fully to the day. It is a space defined not by what is present, but by the quiet absence of warmth, the absence of movement, and the heavy, settling silence of the early hour. The air here is stationary, thick with the scent of damp mortar, and the faint and lingering memory of a candle that burned itself out hours ago. There is a weight to this air, a physical pressure that seems to press gently against the rough, hewn walls, keeping the stillness intact. Outside, the world may be turning. The wind may be shifting through the trees, but in here, there is only the gray. It begins as a subtle shift in the darkness, a dilution of the black that fills the corners of the room. High up on the wall, there is a narrow slit, a gap in the masonry no wider than a hand, intended for arrows, but now serving only as a passage for the cold morning light. The light does not stream in, it is too weak for that. Instead, it seeps, moving like a slow, pale mist that drifts down the rough surface of the stone, catching on the uneven texture of the blocks. It is a colorless light, stripped of the gold of sunrise or the blue of the sky, rendered down to a simple, flat gray that reveals the dust motes floating in the stagnant air. On the narrow bed pushed against the far wall, the knight lies motionless. He is not yet awake, but he is no longer asleep. He exists in that drift between the two states, a gray space that matches the room around him. His breathing is slow and shallow, a rhythmic rising and falling that barely disturbs the heavy wool blanket pulled up to his chin. The blanket is coarse, woven from the wool of sheep that live on windswept hills, and it carries the smell of lanolin and dust. It is scratchy against the skin, a rough texture that is the only source of warmth in the stone box of a room. He becomes aware of the cold first. It is not a sharp, biting cold, but a deep, permeating chill that radiates from the stone floor, travels up through the wooden frame of the bed, and seeps through the thin straw mattress. The mattress has long since lost its loft. The straw within has been compressed by the weight of his body night after night, turning into a dense, hard mat that offers little separation from the planks beneath. He can feel the hardness of the wood pressing against his shoulder blade, a dull, constant reminder of the unyielding nature of his world. His eyes open slowly, the lids feeling heavy, as if weighted down by the fatigue that never truly leaves him. He does not blink immediately. He simply stares up at the ceiling, where the shadows are still clinging to the wooden beams. The timber is old, darkened by the smoke of countless fires, and it seems to absorb the gray light rather than reflect it. There is a knot in the wood, directly above him. A dark swirl that looks like a calm, unblinking eye, watching him as he wakes. He has looked at this knot for 100 mornings, and it has never changed, a fixed point in a life of constant movement. He shifts his leg beneath the blanket, and the movement is small, but it sends a ripple of sensation through his body. His knee is stiff, the joint feeling like a rusted hinge that has been left out in the rain. There is a dull ache deep inside the bone, a memory of a fall from a horse years ago, or perhaps a blow taken on a shield that shuddered through his frame. He cannot quite remember which specific event caused it, for the aches have blended together over time into a single, unified map of pain that he wears like a second skin. He stretches his toes, and they crack, the sound loud and dry in the quiet room. The air in the room is cold enough that he can see his own breath. With every exhalation, a small, white cloud forms above his lips, lingering for a moment before dissolving into the grayness. He watches these clouds, mesmerizing in their repetition. They are the only things moving in the room, the only proof that time is passing. Breathe in, the chest rises against the weight of the wool. Breathe out, the white mist appears, swirls, and vanishes. It is a slow rhythm, slower than the beat of a heart, calm and involuntary. He knows he must rise. He knows that the day has begun, regardless of his readiness for it. But for these few moments, he allows himself the luxury of stillness. He listens to the silence, peeling back its layers to find the sounds hidden beneath. At first, there is nothing. Then, he hears the faint, rhythmic dripping of water somewhere outside. It is raining. The realization settles on him with a heaviness that matches the blanket. Rain means mud. Rain means the leather will be slick and heavy. Rain means the iron will want to rust before he even steps out the door. The sound of the rain is muffled by the thick stone walls, turning it into a distant, soothing hum. It is a continuous, soft static that wraps around the tower. He imagines the water hitting the stones outside, darkening the gray granite, running in small rivulets down the mortar lines. He imagines the trees in the courtyard standing still and dripping, their branches heavy with water. The world outside is wet and cold, and soon he will be part of it, but for now he is dry. The dryness of the straw mattress, despite its hardness, feels like a treasure. He shifts again, rolling slightly onto his side. The movement pulls the blanket tight across his shoulder, and the rough wool scrapes against his neck. The sensation is grounding. It brings him back to the physical reality of his body. He feels the weight of his own arm as he pulls it out from under the warmth of the covers. The air hits his skin instantly, cool and indifferent. His hand is scarred, the knuckles enlarged and rough, the skin weathered by wind and sun, and the constant friction of leather gauntlets. He looks at his hand in the dim light, flexing the fingers slowly. They are stiff, resistant to closing into a fist. He has to force them, pushing against the natural resistance of the cold tendons. Open, close. Open, close. He works the stiffness out of his hand, watching the tendons shift beneath the pale skin. This is the ritual of the morning. Before the armor can be donned, the body must be convinced to move. It is a negotiation between the mind, which knows what must be done, and the frame, which only wants to return to the dark, warm void of sleep. He rubs his face with his hand, the roughness of his palm rasping against the stubble on his chin. His beard is growing thick again. Another thing to tend to, another maintenance task in a life composed entirely of maintenance. The light from the slit in the wall has shifted slightly, becoming a shade brighter, though no warmer. It falls across the stone floor, illuminating the dust that has gathered in the corners. The floor is made of large, flat flagstones, uneven and cold. He knows exactly how they will feel under his bare feet. He knows which stone wobbles slightly, if stepped on, in the center. He knows which one is always colder than the others, seemingly drawing the chill directly from the earth deep below, the foundation. He braces himself for that contact, mentally rehearsing the shock of the cold. He pushes the blanket down to his waist. The cold air rushes in to claim the rest of his torso. He wears a simple linen shirt, thin and worn soft by countless washings. It offers no protection against the temperature of the room. He shivers once, a full body tremor that starts at his spine and shakes the stiffness out of his shoulders. It is an involuntary reaction, the body's attempt to generate a spark of heat in the stagnant air. He sits up slowly, the straw mattress creaking beneath him. The sound is loud, a protest of dry stalks against wood. Sitting on the edge of the bed, he hunches forward, resting his elbows on his knees and burying his face in his hands. His spine curves, the vertebrae adjusting to the vertical position one by one. He feels the tightness in his lower back, a dense knot of tension that has been there for as long as he can remember. He breathes deeply, expanding his ribs against the tightness, trying to create space inside his own body. The air he inhales tastes of old stone and rain. It is a clean, stark scent, devoid of the perfumes of the court or the smoke of the feast hall. It is the scent of the garrison, of waiting, of endurance. He lowers his hands and looks around the small room. It is sparse. A wooden chest at the foot of the bed, reinforced with iron bands. A small stool in the corner. And there, on a wooden stand, the armor. In the gloom, it looks like a dismembered metal husk. The helmet sits at the top, hollow and dark, the visor closed like a sleeping face. The breastplate catches the gray light, a dull gleam on the curve of the steel. The chainmail hauberk hangs beneath it, a heavy, fluid curtain of iron rings. It waits for him. It has a presence of its own, a silent, demanding gravity. He stares at the armor, and he feels the phantom weight of it already settling on his shoulders. He knows the specific pinch of the gorget, the way the greaves will rub against his shins, the limited vision through the helmet. But that is for later. Right now, there is only the transition. He places one foot on the floor. The stone is exactly as cold as he expected, a shock that travels up his leg and wakes the muscles of his calf. He places the other foot down. Now he is grounded. The earth, through the stone, connects to him. He sits there for a long moment, his bare feet on the freezing stones, his hands resting on his knees. He is simply breathing. He is gathering the will to stand. The day stretches out before him, a long gray road of duty and discomfort. But in this quiet chamber, with the rain drumming softly against the walls and the light barely strong enough to cast a shadow, there is a strange, melancholy peace. He is alone. The world has not yet demanded anything of him. He is just a man in a cold room, listening to the rain, feeling the blood begin to move through his tired veins. He stands up. The motion is slow, deliberate. His knees crack again. He straightens his back, reaching his full height, his head approaching the low timber beams of the ceiling. The air is slightly warmer up here, though not by much. He walks to the narrow window slit, his steps silent on the stones. He leans forward, the rough stone of the wall pressing against his palms, and looks out. The world outside is a tapestry of grays and greens. The rain falls in sheets, blurring the horizon. The trees are swaying gently, surrendering to the wind. The courtyard below is empty, save for a few puddles forming in the depressions of the mud. It is a bleak view, yet it holds a quiet beauty. It is raw and honest. There is no pretense in the rain, no deception in the cold. It simply is. And he, standing there in his thin linen shirt, feeling the chill radiate from the wall, is simply a part of it. He turns away from the window, leaving the gray view behind. He walks toward the wooden chest, where his undergarments are kept. The routine begins. The awakening is over. The silence of the sleep has been broken by the sound of his own movement. He reaches for the latch of the chest, the cold iron biting into his fingertips. The metal feels sleepy and heavy, just as he does. The lid creaks open, revealing the layers of wool and padded cloth that will serve as his second skin. The room seems to darken slightly as the clouds outside thicken, the gray light dimming to a deeper shade. The shadows in the corners stretch out, reclaiming the space. The air remains still, heavy with the moisture of the morning. He picks up the padded gambeson, the fabric thick and quilted. It is heavy in his hands, heavier than a shirt should be. He runs his thumb over the stitching, feeling the texture of the linen. It is the first layer of the burden he will carry today. He holds it for a moment, not yet putting it on. He stands in the center of the room, surrounded by the stone, the silence, and the smell of the coming rain. He takes one last deep breath of the unencumbered air, filling his lungs completely, feeling his ribs expand without the restriction of leather straps or steel plates. He holds the breath, savoring the freedom of it, the simple, unnoticed miracle of effortless expansion. Then, slowly, quietly, he exhales. The breath leaves him in a long, steady stream, a final white cloud that drifts toward the ceiling and dissolves into the darkness of the beams. The room is quiet. The rain continues its gentle drumming. The day has officially begun. The padded gambeson is heavy in his hands, a dense quilt of linen and wool that feels less like clothing and more like a soft fortification. He lifts it slowly, the fabric rustling with a dry, hushed sound that seems loud in the quiet room. It smells of old storage, a mixture of dried herbs packed away to keep moths at bay, and the faint, indelible scent of sweat that never truly washes out of the thick padding. He pushes his arms into the sleeves. The material resists him at first, stiff from the cold and the night's rest. It slides over his linen shirt, the rough texture catching slightly, a friction that signals the beginning of his containment. As he pulls the garment over his shoulders, the world instantly feels smaller. The gambeson is thick, designed to absorb the blunt force of a blow, but in doing so, it muffles the body's connection to the air. The chill of the room is pushed back, replaced by a sudden, stifling warmth that does not breathe. He fumbles with the ties at the front, his fingers working the laces through the reinforced eyelets. The laces are made of braided cord, frayed at the ends, and they require patience. He ties them one by one, starting from the waist and working his way up to the neck. With each knot, the fabric pulls tighter against his chest, a gentle but firm squeeze that restricts the deep expansion of his ribs. He stands there for a moment, encased in the padding. He moves his arms, and the fabric bunches at the elbows, limiting his range of motion. He is already slower, already heavier, and he has not yet touched the metal. He walks to the stool in the corner, to sit the movement awkward as the long skirts of the gambeson settle around his legs. It is time for the legs to be armored. He reaches for the mail chausses, the leggings of chain links. They lie in a heap on the floor like a pool of dark, metallic water. When he picks them up, they flow through his hands, slippery and impossibly heavy for their size. Thousands of tiny, riveted rings slide against one another, making a sound like water rushing over pebbles. Sh-clink, sh-clink. The metal is freezing. It holds the temperature of the stone floor, a concentrated essence of the winter morning. He pulls the mail over his legs, the rings biting cold through the thin hose underneath. Gravity takes hold of the metal immediately, pulling it down, wanting it to return to the floor. He has to secure it tightly with leather thongs below the knee and at the waist, cinching the straps until they dig into his skin. The weight does not disappear. It just hangs from his hips now, a constant downward drag that makes his legs feel like pillars of stone. He stands up, and his steps are different. They are planted, deliberate. The natural bounce of a human walk is gone, replaced by a plodding stability. Now comes the hauberk, the shirt of mail. It rests on the table, a sprawling mass of iron. He lifts it, grunting softly at the dead weight. It is a lifeless thing, a burden of 40 pounds that offers no assistance. He gathers the hem, bunching the rings together until he holds the bulk of it in his arms. He bows his head and lifts the mass, plunging his face into the dark, cold opening of the neck. For a second, he is blind, surrounded by the smell of iron and oil. The links press against his face, cold and hard. Then, with a heavy whoosh, the mail slides down. It cascades over his shoulders, down his back, and over his chest. The sound is a sudden crash of thousands of tiny cymbals that is immediately silenced as the weight settles. The impact on his shoulders is profound. It is not a sharp pain, but a sudden compression of the spine. He feels himself shrink slightly, the vertebrae compacting under the load. The mail hangs heavy, pulling at the trapezius muscles, a relentless gravity that will not cease until he takes it off tonight. He adjusts the shoulders, shrugging to settle the rings. The mail conforms to his body like a liquid, taking his shape, but it has no give. If he leans forward, it pulls against his back. If he turns, it swings with a slight delay, its momentum independent of his own. He is now sheathed in iron skin. The smell of the metal is overpowering now, a sharp, acidic tang that fills his nose and coats the back of his throat. It is the taste of a penny magnified. He walks back to the wooden stand. The breastplate waits. It is a solid piece of steel, dull gray in the morning light, pitted with the tiny scars of use. He lifts it. It is rigid, unyielding. Unlike the mail, which flows, the plate dictates. It has a shape, and his body must fit inside it. He slides it over his head, the front plate clattering softly against the back plate as they meet at the shoulders. He reaches for the buckles at his sides. This is a familiar dance, a tactile search for the leather straps that dangle under his arms. His fingers find the cold, stiff leather. He pulls the strap on the left, feeding it through the iron buckle. He pulls it tight. Creak. The leather complains. He pulls it tighter to the third hole. the one that is worn and stretched. The steel plates clamp together around his torso. The sensation is one of being held in a giant, unfeeling hand. He repeats the process on the right. With both sides cinched, his breathing changes. He can no longer breathe with his belly. The steel plate presses against his diaphragm. He must breathe with the upper part of his chest, shallow, rhythmic sips of air. The armor dictates the rhythm of his life now. He is encased. The warmth of his body begins to build inside the layers, trapped by the gambeson, unable to escape through the steel. He can feel a bead of sweat already forming at the small of his back, despite the chill of the room. He picks up the pauldrons, the curved plates that will protect his shoulders. They attach with intricate points and laces. He ties them on, the laces requiring dexterity that his cold fingers struggle to provide. Once attached, they add width to his frame. He turns his head and his chin bumps against the metal ridge of the shoulder guard. His movement is becoming segmented, robotic. To look to the side, he must turn his whole torso. The fluid grace of the human form is being systematically erased, replaced by the mechanical articulation of joints and rivets. Finally, he reaches for the gauntlets. They lie on the chest, fingers curled in a permanent, hollow grasp. They are made of leather and steel scales, overlapping like the shell of a lobster. He slides his left hand in. The leather inside is smooth, polished by the friction of his own skin over the years. It is cool and dry. As he pushes his fingers into the stalls, the sensation of the room disappears. He can no longer feel the texture of the air, the coldness of the stone, or the roughness of the wood. He flexes his hand. The steel plates on the back of the gauntlet slide over each other with a soft clack, clack, clack. He looks at his hand. It is no longer a hand. It is a tool of iron. He picks up the right gauntlet. He has to use his armored left hand to pull it on. The lack of sensation makes him clumsy. He paws at the glove, finally managing to slide his right hand inside. He makes a fist, then opens it. The resistance of the leather and the weight of the scales make every movement of his fingers an effort. Even an open hand requires energy to maintain. He stands in the center of the room, fully armored from the neck down. He is a tower of steel and wool. The silence of the room seems deeper now, filtered through the layers of padding around his ears, though his head is still bare. He hears the creaking of his own movement, the leather groaning against steel, the mail chiming softly with his breath. He feels the floor beneath his sabatons, the armored shoes. He can no longer feel the individual flagstones or the cold. He only feels the hard, flat impact of the sole against the ground. He is insulated, separated, contained. The burdens have been layered, one by one, until the man he was 10 minutes ago is buried deep beneath the shell. He is heavy, grounded, and formidable, but he is also trapped. He takes a breath, the steel breastplate rising slightly, and exhales, the sound echoing faintly off the metal chest. The transformation is nearly complete. Only the world of sight and sound remains to be narrowed. He looks toward the helmet. It waits. The helmet sits on the wooden stand, a hollow sphere of cold. Darkened steel. It is the final piece, the crowning weight that will complete the enclosure. To look at it is to look into a void. The interior is shadowed and unknowable, a small, dark cave waiting to be inhabited. The knight reaches out with his gauntleted hands. The metal scales of his gloves scrape against the smooth surface of the helmet, a sound like stone sliding over ice. He lifts it. It is dense, a concentrated mass of iron that seems heavier than its size should allow. It carries the weight of a stone, yet it is shaped to hold a mind. He holds it at chest level for a moment, staring at the narrow eye slit. The ocularium. It is a thin, horizontal gap, no wider than a finger, reinforced by a protruding ridge of steel. Through this slit, he will see the world for the rest of the day. Through this slit, the vastness of the forest, the width of the sky, and the expanse of the horizon will be reduced to a single, narrow strip. He takes a slow breath, filling his lungs with the open air of the room one last time, tasting the damp stone and the faint dust. Then he raises the steel bowl above his head. He lowers it slowly. The rim of the helmet passes his eyes, and the room disappears. For a brief second, there is only darkness. The transition between the outer world and the inner sanctuary. The steel slides down over his ears, cutting off the sharp frequencies of the air. It slides past his jaw, enclosing his face. The padded liner inside, a cap of quilted linen and wool, settles firmly against his skull, gripping his forehead and the back of his neck. The weight settles. The helmet comes to rest on the gorget around his neck, the metal edges locking together with a dull, heavy thud. He is inside. The first sensation is one of profound separation. The air inside the helmet is different from the air outside. It is still, stagnant, and instantly begins to warm. The vast, cool atmosphere of the stone chamber has been replaced by a tiny, private climate that exists only inches from his face. He blinks, his eyelashes brushing against the emptiness. He looks forward. The world has been cropped. The stone walls, the wooden beams, the gray light, everything is gone, replaced by the dark, curved interior of the visor. In the center of this darkness, there is a bar of light. The eye slit. It is a bright, horizontal rectangle, a glowing letterbox that floats in the gloom. Through it, he can see a slice of the room, the wooden chest, a section of the gray wall, the dust motes dancing in the beam of light. But he cannot see the floor at his feet. He cannot see the ceiling above. He cannot see his own shoulders, to see anything other than what is directly in front of him. He must turn his entire head, and with it, the heavy steel shell. He turns his head to the left. The movement is sluggish. The helmet adds mass to his movements, creating a delay between his intention and the action. The view sweeps across the room like a lantern beam in a dark cellar. The world smears slightly as he turns, the narrow vision making it hard to track objects. He stops. He is looking at the window slit now. The gray light is brighter here, almost blinding in contrast to the dark interior of the helmet. He feels like a creature looking out from a burrow, safe but hidden, watching the world from a deep recess. He breathes out. Ooh. The sound is startlingly loud. The steel amplifies his breath, catching the sound waves and bouncing them back into his ears. It is a hollow, rushing sound, like the wind blowing across the mouth of a cave. He hears the air leave his nostrils, hears it hit the metal plate in front of his mouth, hears the turbulence of it swirling in the confined space. He is no longer listening to the room, he is listening to himself. The rhythm of his own life, the inhale, the pause, the exhale, becomes the dominant soundtrack of his existence. He breathes in. The air is slightly metallic now, tainted with the smell of the iron that surrounds him. It is a sharp, clean scent, but it is heavy. He can smell the leather of the liner, the oil used to polish the inside of the visor, and the faint, salty scent of his own skin. The helmet traps everything. There is no breeze to carry these scents away. They linger, building a dense atmosphere that is entirely his own. A sensation of warmth begins to bloom on his face. The heat from his skin radiates outward, hits the cold steel, and reflects back. The air in front of his nose and mouth becomes humid. With each exhalation, a faint mist touches the metal. He cannot see it, but he can feel the change in the air quality. It becomes tropical, damp, and heavy, contrasting with the chill that still presses against the outside of the steel. On a truly cold day, he knows his breath would freeze on the metal, forming a delicate frost that he could touch with his lips. Today, it is just a damp sheen, a layer of moisture that begins to bead on the smooth surface. He tries to swallow. The sound is a loud click in his ears, magnified by the acoustic chamber. Every internal noise is exaggerated. The grinding of his teeth, the movement of his tongue, the clearing of his throat. They are all events, loud and significant in the silence. The outside world, by comparison, has retreated. The sound of the rain, which was so clear just moments ago, is now a dull, distant drumming. It sounds as if it is happening to someone else in a place far away. The wind is a muffled moan, stripped of its sharpness. If someone were to speak to him now, their voice would sound hollow, as if coming through a thick wall. He feels a pressure on his forehead. The padded liner is snug, designed to keep the helmet from shifting, but it creates a constant, low-level compression. It is a band of tightness that encircles his skull. It is not painful, not yet, but it is present. It is a reminder that he is being held. The weight of the helmet pushes down on his neck muscles, engaging the trapezius and the upper spine. He has to hold his head up with intention. If he relaxes completely, his chin would drop to his chest. He must maintain a subtle, constant tension in his neck to keep his vision level. He blinks again, staring at the slice of the world. The isolation is almost peaceful. In here, there are no distractions. There is only the focus on what is directly ahead. The periphery is gone. The chaos of the wider world is blocked out by curved steel. He is safe in here. It is a womb of iron, but it is also a cage. He cannot touch his own face. He cannot rub his eyes. If a hair falls across his forehead, he cannot brush it away. He is separated from his own body by the very thing that protects it. He moves his jaw, testing the space. His chin brushes the bottom of the visor. The space is tight. He is intimate with the metal. He knows every curve of the interior, every rough spot in the liner. He shifts his weight, and the helmet shifts with him a fraction of a second later. The connection is not seamless. There is a slight lag, a floating sensation, as if his head is swimming inside a heavy bowl. He walks toward the door of the chamber. The sound of his footsteps is different now. The clank of the sabatons is distant, filtering up through the floor and the body rather than through the air. The vibration travels up his shins, through his knees, up his spine, and resonates in the base of his skull. He feels the walking more than he hears it. He is a self-contained ecosystem of sound and vibration, moving through the world, but not fully touching it. He reaches the heavy wooden door. He reaches out with his gauntleted hand to push it open. Through the narrow slit, he sees the wood grain, the iron handle, the stone archway. But he does not see the floor. He has to trust his feet. He has to trust his memory of the room. He steps forward into the unknown space below his vision. The transition is complete. The man is gone, hidden away in the dark. Only the night remains, a creature of steel and slit. Vision, breathing his own air, listening to the echo of his own life, ready to step out into the rain that he will feel but never truly touch. The wooden door groans, shut behind him, sealing away the stillness of the stone chamber, and he is immediately claimed by the rhythm of the outside world. He is mounted now, though the memory of climbing onto the horse, a clumsy, clattering struggle against gravity and stiff joints, has already faded into the general blur of the morning. What remains is the motion. He is a tower of steel perched upon a beast of muscle and bone, a rigid statue forcing itself to sway with the living gait of the animal beneath him. The horse, a large, dark destrier with a coat that steams in the cold air, moves with a heavy, plodding cadence, its hooves sinking deep into the softened earth of the track. The world has narrowed even further, constrained not just by the slit of the visor, but by the repetitive, hypnotic nature of the march. The view ahead is a bobbing frame of gray and brown. The horse's head dips and rises, a metronome of flesh that marks the passing of seconds. Through the narrow ocularium, he watches the coarse black hair of the horse's mane whipping in the wind. It dances and tangles, wet with rain, flicking back toward him like dark seagrass in a current. It is an endless, chaotic motion that captures the eye and holds it, dragging his focus into a trance. The mane is the only thing that seems truly alive in this landscape. Everything else is frozen in the grip of the late autumn chill. Beneath him, the saddle is a tortured device of wet leather and hard wood. It is slick with rain, yet it grips the inner thighs of his armor with a friction that squeaks and groans with every step. Creak, shift, creak, shift. The sound is relentless. It is the voice of the march, a dry, complaining friction that travels from the saddle leather up through the metal plates of his tassets and into his hips. The armor does not want to bend. The steel plates on his legs are designed for standing or deflecting blows, not for the constant, rhythmic spreading of the hips required to ride. He fights the metal with every stride, his muscles maintaining a low, level tension just to keep his seat. The impact of the hooves is not just a sound, it is a physical sensation that travels vertically through his entire body. The horse steps, the hoof strikes the mud. The shockwave moves up the animal's leg, through its shoulder, into the saddle, and straight into the knight's spine. Thud. It hits the base of his tailbone. Thud. It rattles the vertebrae in his lower back. Thud. It vibrates the base of his skull where the helmet rests. It is a jarring, staccato rhythm that never ceases. His spine feels like a stack of coins being hammered slowly, continuously, compressing deeper with every mile. There is no suspension, no softness to absorb the blow. There is only the hard saddle, the hard armor, and the hard bone. The rain has settled in for the day. It is not a storm, but a steady, soaking drizzle that permeates everything. He wears a heavy wool cloak over his pauldrons, dyed a deep, sullen red, meant to keep the water off the metal. But the cloak has betrayed him. It has drunk the rain, absorbing the water until it hangs from his shoulders like a leaden sheet. It is no longer fabric, it is a wet, dragging weight that pulls him backward. He can feel the water seeping through the weave, finding the gaps in the fibers, making the wool heavy and dense. The wet, fabric clings to the steel of his shoulder plates, slapping against the metal with a wet thwack when the wind gusts. Deeper down, beneath the armor, the dampness is finding its way in. The air inside the suit is cooling. The tropical microclimate of the helmet now fighting against the invasive chill of the soaked cloak. The linen of his gambeson, particularly where the cloak presses against his neck, is beginning to feel clammy. It is a slow creep of discomfort. A cold patch forms on his left shoulder, then another at the nape of his neck. The wet wool rubs against his skin, a rough, abrasive friction that chafes raw spots into the flesh. He shifts his shoulders, trying to lift the weight of the cloak, but it settles back instantly, heavier than before, hugging him with a cold, suffocating embrace. He looks down, tilting his helmeted head with effort. The ground is a churned mess of mud and water. The horse's hooves act like pistons, driving into the earth and pulling out with a wet, sucking sound. Squelch, suck, squelch, suck. The mud is brown and gray, swirling with the rainwater, forming little pools in the hoofprints that reflect the dull sky. He watches the mud fly up in small clumps, sticking to the horse's fetlocks, splashing against his own metal sabatons. His feet, encased in steel, dangle in the stirrups like anchors. They are heavy, motionless, and splashed with the grime of the road. The mud dries on the metal, adding its own small weight, layer by layer, turning the shining steel into something earthen and dull. The rhythm of the march begins to distort his sense of time. Has it been an hour? 3 hours? The light does not change. The gray sky remains a flat, unbroken ceiling. The trees passing on the periphery are identical. Skeleton branches, wet bark, clinging dead leaves. They slide past the edge of his vision like ghosts, appearing for a second, and then vanishing behind the steel blinder of the helmet. There are no landmarks, only the road. The road is the world. The repetitive motion lulls the mind into a strange, waking sleep. His thoughts detach from the present. He finds himself staring at a rivet on the horse's bridle, obsessing over the way it catches a drop of water, holds it, and then releases it. He tries to adjust his position to relieve the pressure on his sit bones. He leans forward slightly. The breastplate digs into his stomach. He leans back. The backplate presses into his spine, and the heavy cloak drags at his throat. There is no true relief, only a trading of one discomfort for another. He settles back into the original pain. At least it is familiar. The body begins to accept the suffering as a baseline. The numbness in his toes, the ache in his lower back, the pinch of the helmet, they become the background noise of his existence, as constant and ignored as the sound of the wind. The wind is picking up, whistling through the trees and cutting across the open path. It hits his helmet with a hollow, flute-like sound as it passes over the ventilation holes. Inside, the air swirls, carrying the smell of wet decay, of rotting leaves and soaked earth. It is the scent of late autumn, heavy and melancholic. The wind pushes against his side, a giant, invisible hand trying to topple the steel tower. He has to engage his core muscles to stay upright, fighting the gust. The horse stumbles slightly on a slick patch of clay, and the sudden jar snaps the knight's head forward. The helmet weighs heavy on his neck. His muscles flare in protest, a sharp, hot line of pain that runs down to his shoulders before settling back into the dull throb. He listens to the sounds of the patrol around him, though he cannot see them. The creak of another saddle, the cough of a man, the jingle of a harness. They are ghosts in the mist, present only by the noise they make. He is alone in his metal shell, rocking back and forth, back and forth. The motion is endless. The horizon never seems to get closer. The horse's mane keeps dancing. The rain keeps falling. He is merely a passenger on a journey that feels like it has no beginning and will have no end, suspended in the rhythm of the march. Carried forward by the plodding, unstoppable will of the beast beneath him. The world is reduced to the next step, and the next, a cycle of mud, metal, and gray endurance. The rain has ceased to be a mere accompaniment to the journey. It has become a persistent, inquisitive force that seeks out every weakness in the steel shell. For hours, the armor has repelled the assault. The water beating on the oiled metal and streaming harmlessly to the ground. But the elements are patient, and water is fluid, finding paths that the eye cannot see. It begins as a sensation so slight it might be imagined. A faint, cool tickle at the side of the neck, just beneath the rim of the helmet and above the leather collar of the gorget. A single drop, cold and heavy, has navigated the complex overlap of steel plates. It slides down the skin, a slow, icy track that feels shockingly distinct against the accumulated warmth of the body. It trails over the collarbone, seeking the hollow of the throat. The knight flinches, a microscopic spasm of the muscles, but there is nothing to be done. He cannot reach inside. He cannot wipe it away. He must simply wait for the droplet to lose its chill or to be absorbed by the damp linen of the undergarment. It is a small breach, a tiny victory for the weather, but it signals a shift. The armor is no longer a hermetic seal. The world is finding its way in. Beneath the breastplate, the temperature battle is being slowly, inexorably lost. The large, curved slab of steel that protects the chest acts as a perfect conductor, eager to equalize with the freezing air outside. It draws the heat from his torso, pulling the warmth through the layers of the padded gambeson and the chainmail, radiating it out into the gray afternoon. He can feel the coldness of the plate hovering just millimeters from his ribs, a solid block of winter pressing against his core. The padding, which felt so stiflingly hot in the stone chamber, is now the only thing keeping the shivering at bay. It has become a damp barrier, fighting a silent war of thermal dynamics that the steel is destined to win. He shifts in the saddle, trying to pull his chest away from the cold metal, but the breastplate moves with him. It is a second skin, heavy and unfeeling. The cold seems to settle into the sternum, a deep, resonant ache that slows the heart. His breath, trapped inside the helmet, does little to warm the intake of air. He inhales the dampness, tasting the rain before he even feels it. The air inside the visor has grown heavy with moisture, the condensation building on the metal surfaces until the interior feels like a cold, wet cave. His legs, hanging motionless in the stirrups, have ceased to feel like part of his body. They are weighted down by the sabatons and the greaves, but now the earth itself is claiming them. The mud from the road, churned up by the hooves of the horses ahead, has splashed and clung to the armor. It dries in layers, then is wetted again, building up a thick, chaotic stucco of clay and grit on the shins. The mud fills the subtle articulations of the ankle joints, hardening in the crevices. When he flexes his foot, he feels the gritty resistance of the earth grinding against the steel rivets. His legs feel like stone columns, architectural features that belong to a statue rather than a living man. They are heavy, numb anchors dragging him down toward the soil. The wind has changed direction, shifting to blow directly into his face. It catches the slits of the visor, whistling with a low, mournful tone that vibrates against his teeth. Hoo, hoo. The sound is constant, a lonely woodwind note played by the gale across the metal lip of the eye slit. It carries with it a fine mist, a spray of atomized rain that passes through the narrow gap and lands on his cheeks and eyelashes. He blinks, his eyelids heavy, trying to clear his vision without the use of his hands. The water blurs the world, turning the gray trees into smudges of charcoal against a canvas of slate. A sudden, sharp itch flares on the side of his nose. It is a trivial thing, a small nerve firing in protest of the damp air or a stray hair from his beard curling the wrong way. In any other moment of his life, it would be dismissed with a subconscious brush of the hand. Here, inside the helmet, it becomes a monumental event. His hands are encased in gauntlets resting on the reins. Even if he were to raise them, he could not reach his face. The visor is fixed. He is sealed in. He tries to wiggle his nose, contorting his face in the darkness of the helmet, grimacing and stretching the skin, but the itch remains, persistent and maddeningly unreachable. He focuses on it, the sensation growing large in the sensory vacuum, until it is the only thing he can feel. Then, slowly, as the minutes drag on, it fades into the dull background of general discomfort, another small surrender to the situation. He looks out at the horizon, or where the horizon should be. There is no line dividing the earth from the sky. The gray of the muddy road rises up to meet the gray of the sodden fields, which merge seamlessly into the gray of the low, hanging clouds. It is a world without color, a monochrome study in endurance. The rain falls in vertical lines, a cage of water bars that surrounds him. He watches the water run down the back of the horse's neck, channeling through the grooves of the mane. He watches a bead of water form on the upper edge of his visor, trembling in the wind, growing heavy and fat, until it finally breaks tension and streaks down across his field of vision, distorting the world for a split second before vanishing. There is no shelter here. To stop would be to freeze. To dismount would be to sink. The only option is to exist within the elements, to become as hard and unfeeling as the armor he wears. He stops fighting the cold. He stops shrinking away from the wet wool on his shoulders. He lets the weight of the cloak press him down into the saddle. He allows the wind to whistle its song. He is merely another object in the storm, a rock in the stream, waiting for the water to flow past. The passage of time is marked not by the sun, which is hidden, but by the gradual soaking of his bones, the slow, creeping numbness that is both a danger and a mercy. The elements are unyielding, and so he must simply be. The patrol has halted, not for rest, but for necessity. The shelter is a humble structure, a roadside lean to built of rough, hewn timber and thatched with rotting straw, standing alone against the gray backdrop of the forest edge. It offers only a partial reprieve from the elements, a three-walled sanctuary where the wind still curls around the corners. But the direct assault of the rain is broken. The sound of the world changes instantly as he steps beneath the overhang. The relentless drumming on his helmet ceases, replaced by the softer, more chaotic patter of water hitting the thatch above and dripping from the eaves into the mud. It is a quieter space, a pause in the audio landscape of the storm, allowing the smaller sounds of the gear to return to the forefront. He does not sit. To sit would be to invite the difficulty of rising again, and the armor, wet and heavy, settles better when the spine is straight. He leans against one of the sturdy wooden support posts, the bark rough and damp against his pauldrons. The wood groans slightly under the sudden addition of his weight, a deep, organic creak that mingles with the clinking of his chains. His horse stands nearby, head low, steam rising from its flanks to join the mist, grateful for the stillness. But for the night, the stillness is not idle. It is merely a shift in labor, a transition from the physical endurance of the ride to the meticulous, dexterous burden of maintenance. He looks down at his legs. The mud has begun to dry on the greaves, forming a gray crust that hides the metal. He reaches into a pouch on his belt, his gauntleted fingers fumbling with the wet leather toggle. It takes 2 tries to open it. He withdraws a rag, already stained dark with grease and dirt, and begins the first task, the cleaning. He wipes the shin plate. The dried mud resists at first, then smears, then clears away, revealing the steel beneath. The metal is dull, stripped of its morning shine by the moisture and the grime. And there, near the ankle, where the water pooled in the lip of the sabaton, he sees it, a small, faint bloom of orange. It is tiny, no larger than a lentil, a scattering of reddish, brown dust on the gray surface. Rust. The enemy that never sleeps. The rain has only been falling for half a day, yet the oxidation has already begun its work. It is a silent, creeping infection that seeks to turn the iron back into earth. If left unchecked, it will pit the surface, weaken the plate, and eventually eat through the protection that his life depends on. He sighs, the sound lost inside the helmet. He reaches back into the pouch and pulls out a small flask made of horn, corked with a piece of wood. He pulls the cork with his teeth, the taste of the oil transferring briefly to his lips. Bitter, earthy, and pungent. It is the smell of the armory, the smell of the smithy, the smell of his entire life. He tilts the flask, allowing a small, viscous dollop of oil to fall onto the rag. The oil is thick in the cold air, moving like honey, dark and golden. He bends down. The movement is restricted. The breastplate pushes into his throat, the tassets dig into his thighs. He cannot reach his ankle easily. He has to contort, twisting his torso, fighting the stiffness of the cold joints and the rigid plates. He applies the oiled rag to the spot of rust. Rub, rub, rub. The motion is small, circular, and repetitive. He focuses his eyes on the orange spot. The oil darkens the steel, creating a slick, shiny window on the dull metal. He applies pressure, feeling the friction through the leather of his gauntlet. The rust is stubborn. It clings to the microscopic texture of the steel. He rubs harder, the circles widening slightly, then narrowing again. It is a hypnotic action. The world narrows down to this 1 square inch of metal. The rain, the cold, the fatigue, they all recede, leaving only the rhythmic movement of his hand. Rub, rub, rub. The orange stain begins to break apart, dissolving into the dark swirl of the oil. It lifts from the steel, captured by the fibers of the rag. He keeps rubbing long, after the visible rust is gone, working the oil deep into the pores of the metal, creating a barrier against the moisture that hangs in the air. He moves up the leg, finding another spot near the knee. then another on the outer thigh. The armor is needy. It demands constant attention, constant feeding. It is not a passive tool. It is a hungry thing that consumes time and energy in exchange for its hardness. He switches hands. His right arm aches from the repetitive angle. He transfers the rag to his left hand, which is clumsier. He works on the right greave. The sound of the cloth on the steel is a soft shut, 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 a whispering rhythm that mimics the breathing of a sleeper. The smell of the oil grows stronger, filling the small shelter. It is a heavy scent, cloying and thick, masking the smell of the wet pine and the mud. It coats the back of his throat, a taste that signals safety but also servitude. He pauses to check the rivets that hold the leather straps of the greaves. One of them feels loose. He tests it with his thumb, wiggling the small iron cap. It moves. A fraction of an inch, but it moves. If it fails, the plate will flap loose, exposing the shin. He cannot fix it here. He needs a hammer and an anvil. He can only note it, adding it to the mental list of repairs that will need to be done when, and if, he returns to the garrison. The list is always there, running in the back of his mind. A frayed strap, a dent in the pauldron, a missing link in the mail. The armor is in a constant state of decay, a slow entropy that he must fight every single day. His fingers are growing cold. The oil on the rag seems to conduct the chill. He tries to manipulate a small buckle on the side of his knee, checking its tightness. The metal tongue of the buckle is tiny, and his fingers, wrapped in leather and steel scales, are large and numb. He fumbles. The tongue slips. He tries again. He has to concentrate intensely on this minute task, directing his will into his fingertips, commanding them to feel what they cannot feel. He watches his own hands as if they belong to someone else. Clumsy, thick instruments trying to perform a delicate surgery. Finally, the buckle is secured. He straightens up, the vertebrae in his back popping one by one. The relief of standing tall is fleeting, replaced immediately by the return of the full weight of the mail on his shoulders. He looks at the rag in his hand. It is black now, stained with the residue of the road and the oxidized iron. He folds it carefully, preserving the clean spots for later, and tucks it back into the pouch. He recorks the horn flask, pressing the wood firmly into the neck to prevent leakage. He rests his hand on the hilt of his sword. Even the sword needs care. The leather of the grip is damp. The crossguard is collecting moisture. He knows he should draw it, wipe the blade, and oil it too. But the energy required to pull the long steel from the scabbard feels immense right now. He decides to wait. The scabbard is lined with oiled fur. It will hold for a few more hours. He stands there, listening to the rain drip from the thatch. The maintenance is never finished. It is only paused. The armor owns him. He is its caretaker, its porter, its mechanic. It dictates how he moves, how he sits, how he sees, and how he spends his moments of rest. In the silence of the shelter, looking out at the gray curtain of the rain, he feels the profound weight of that relationship. He is the soft, perishable core inside a hard, demanding shell. The shell protects him, yes, but it also consumes him. A gust of wind blows, rain under the shelter's eaves, spraying his newly oiled graves. The water beads up on the oil, forming perfect, spherical droplets that slide off the metal, leaving no trace. A small satisfaction settles in his chest. The barrier is holding. The ritual has worked. For now, the rust is held at bay. For now, the steel is secure. He takes a deep breath, inhaling the mix of ozone and grease, and prepares to step back out into the wet, gray world. The pause is over. The march waits. The maintenance of the steel is finished, but the maintenance of the man remains. The hunger has been there for hours, lurking beneath the fatigue and the cold, a quiet, persistent hollowness in the center of his torso. It is not a sharp, growling hunger that demands immediate attention. The armor is too tight for that, compressing the stomach and dampening the body's signals. Instead, it is a slow fading of energy, a creeping grayness at the edges of his mind, and a specific, lingering taste in his mouth. He runs his tongue over his teeth. The taste is metallic, a reflection of the world he inhabits. It is the flavor of the air inside the helmet, recycled and tainted by the scent of iron, oil, and wet leather. It tastes of copper and salt, a dry, inorganic residue that seems to coat the roof of his mouth. He swallows, but the taste does not leave. It is part of him now, just as the weight of the male is part of him. The simple desire for something different, something with the warmth of life, or the sweetness of grain, becomes a focused, singular thought. He reaches for the saddlebag on his horse. His movements are still stiff, the cold having seeped back into his joints the moment he stopped moving. The leather of the bag is wet and dark, stiffened by the rain. He struggles with the buckle, his gauntleted fingers slipping on the slick surface. It is a clumsy interaction, a battle between the numbed flesh of his hands and the stubborn, soaked material. Finally, the strap gives way, and he reaches inside. He pulls out a small bundle wrapped in oilcloth. It contains the rations, a strip of dried meat, and a piece of hard, unleavened bread. They are cold. Through the thin cloth, he can feel that they have taken on the temperature of the air. They are dense, solid lumps of sustenance, devoid of comfort. He holds the food in his left hand, the metal scales of the gauntlet clicking softly against the hard tack. Now comes the logistics of consumption. He cannot simply eat. He is a fortress, and fortresses are designed to keep things out, not to let things in. He raises his hand to his face, but the visor is a wall of steel. He must breach his own defenses. With his right hand, he finds the catch on the side of the helmet. He pushes it, and with a grinding of metal on metal, he lifts the visor. The sudden exposure is a shock. The damp air rushes in, hitting his face like a cold, wet towel. The skin around his eyes and mouth, kept in the humid, tropical microclimate of the helmet for hours, instantly tightens. The wind touches his cheeks, carrying the smell of the wet earth and the pine forest, sharp and overwhelming after the stale air of the enclosure. He blinks, his eyes watering slightly in the breeze. For a moment, he just breathes, tasting the raw, unfiltered oxygen. He brings the dried meat to his lips. It is hard, cured to the consistency of wood to survive the journey. He bites down. His jaw meets resistance. The meat does not yield easily. He has to tear at it, engaging the muscles of his neck, pulling with his hand while clamping down with his teeth. The motion is awkward. The gorget, the armor protecting his throat, presses against the underside of his jaw when he opens his mouth too wide. It limits his chewing. He has to take small, shallow bites, grinding the tough fibers with a repetitive, mechanical effort. The sound of his own chewing is loud. Even with the visor up, the helmet acts as an acoustic shell, capturing the crunch and the grind of his molars and amplifying them. Crunch, grind, crunch. It is a primitive, internal noise. He focuses on the texture. The meat is salty, painfully so. The salt blooms in his mouth, stinging the dry tongue, waking up the salivary glands with a sudden, sharp intensity. It is flavor, yes, but it is harsh and aggressive. The meat is cold against his teeth, sucking the warmth from the interior of his mouth. He chews slowly, staring out at the rain. Eating is usually a time of relaxation, a social act shared around a fire. Here, it is merely fueling. It is a task to be completed. He swallows the bolus of meat. He can feel it traveling down his throat, a cold, solid lump passing behind the steel of the gorget, descending past the breastplate and settling into the stomach. It sits there, heavy and unmoving. Next, the bread. It is a dense puck of flour and water, baked twice until it is as hard as a stone. He breaks off a piece, the crumbs exploding outward. He maneuvers the chunk into his mouth. It is dry, sucking up the remaining moisture in his mouth, turning into a thick, pasty mortar. He works his jaw, the muscles beginning to ache from the exertion. Then it happens. A small tragedy of the armored life. A crumb, jagged and hard, escapes his lips. It falls not to the ground but down. It slides over his chin, drops past the rim of the gorget, and slips inside the gambeson. He feels it. A tiny, sharp point of friction. It comes to rest somewhere near his collarbone, trapped between his skin and the layers of padding and mail. He pauses, his hand freezing mid-motion. He waits, hoping it will settle into a place where he cannot feel it. But it shifts. It scratches. It is a microscopic irritant in a world of massive weights. He cannot reach it. He cannot unzip the armor. He cannot take off the gorget. He cannot slide a hand inside the tight lacing of the gambeson. It is there to stay. It will be his companion for the rest of the march. A tiny, sharp reminder of his own entrapment. He exhales a long, frustrated breath, accepting this new, small torture. He needs water. The salt from the meat is burning his throat. He reaches for the waterskin hanging from his saddle. It is a bloated leather bladder, heavy with liquid. He unhooks it. Lifting it to his mouth is a geometric puzzle. If he lifts his arm too high, the pauldron on his shoulder crashes into the side of the helmet. Clang. The sound rings in his ears. He has to adjust the angle, tilting his head back as far as the armor allows, exposing his throat to the cold air. He squeezes the bag. A stream of water shoots out, too fast. It splashes against his face, running down his beard, soaking into the padded liner of the helmet. The water is freezing. It shocks his teeth, numbing the gums instantly. He swallows gulp after gulp, the liquid rushing down to meet the heavy food in his stomach. The cold water chills his core from the inside out. He can feel the temperature of his stomach drop, a radiantly cold center in the middle of his body. The armor pulls heat from the outside. The water pulls heat from the inside. He shivers, a deep, shuddering vibration that rattles the chainmail against his ribs. He lowers the waterskin, wiping his wet mouth with the back of his gauntlet. The rough leather scrapes his skin. He recorks the skin and hangs it back on the saddle. The meal is over. There is no satisfaction, only a fullness that feels like a weight. His stomach feels distended, pressing against the rigid breastplate. Digestion begins, drawing blood away from his extremities, making his fingers and toes feel even colder than before. He lowers the visor. Clang. The world is sealed away again. The wind is cut off. The view is narrowed. The smell of the wet earth is replaced instantly by the smell of the wet wool liner and the lingering scent of the dried meat. He is back inside. He looks at his horse. The animal has its head down, chewing contentedly on a nosebag of oats. It grinds the grain with a smooth, lateral motion of its jaw, unencumbered by steel. Steam rises rhythmically from its nostrils. It looks comfortable in its own skin, its coat shedding the rain, its body generating immense heat. It eats with a simple, fluid grace that the night has lost. He watches the horse swallow, seeing the muscles of its throat work smoothly. He feels a pang of envy, not for the oats, but for the freedom of the act. To simply open a mouth, to chew, to swallow, to shake a head without the weight of iron following the motion. He rests his hand on the horse's neck, feeling the warmth radiating through the wet hair and the leather glove. The horse is alive. He, in this moment, feels like a construct of metal that merely houses a man. The silence of the hunger has been replaced by the silence of digestion. The energy from the food will come, eventually, but for now, there is only the heaviness. The crumb scratches at his collarbone. The metallic taste returns, mingling with the salt. He gathers up the reins. The leather stiff and cold, and prepares to move again. The body has been fueled. The machine can continue. The light begins to withdraw from the world, not with a dramatic exit, but with a slow, reluctant fading that turns the gray sky into a heavy, bruised purple. The forest, which has been a monotonous corridor of wet trunks and brown leaves for hours, now starts to lose its definition. The edges of the trees blur, their forms merging with the shadows that stretch out from the undergrowth. The spaces between the oaks and the pines are filling up with darkness, a liquid gloom that seems to rise from the forest floor like a tide. Inside the helmet, the transition is felt before it is seen. The narrow strip of vision, the night's only connection to the reality outside, grows dimmer. The bright rectangle of the day has softened, the contrast lowering until the world is a wash of muted tones. His eyes, strained from hours of scanning the horizon through a steel gap, struggle to make sense of the deepening shade. The pupils dilate, searching for light that is no longer there, and the effort manifests as a dull, heavy pressure behind the brow. It is a headache born of vigilance, a throbbing tightness that wraps around the skull, mirroring the physical band of the helmet's liner. The body has passed beyond the stage of active discomfort and has entered a state of dull, rhythmic suffering. The pain is no longer a signal to be acted upon. It is simply the texture of existence. The weight of the pauldrons, those curved plates of steel protecting the shoulders, has ceased to be a mere load. It has become a physical crushing. The straps that hold the armor in place have dug deep channels into the padding of the gambeson, compressing the heavy muscle of the trapezius until it feels like burning stone. Every step the horse takes sends a shockwave up the spine that terminates in this burning yoke across the shoulders. It is a hot, grinding sensation, a constant reminder of gravity's victory over the human frame. Far below, at the other end of the armored column, the feet are telling a different story of confinement. The metal sabatons, rigid and unyielding, have not changed their shape since dawn. But the feet inside them have, swollen from the hours of inactivity and the dependency of the legs. The flesh presses against the leather lining and the steel shell. There is no room to wiggle the toes. There is no space to shift the arch. The blood pools in the extremities, trapped by gravity and the constriction of the greaves. A slow, rhythmic throb pulses in the soles of his feet, beating in time with the heart, a heavy thump, 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 thump that feels like it is echoing against the metal toe caps. The feet feel simultaneously numb from the cold and hyper-sensitive from the pressure. Remote objects that belong to him but are currently being tortured by distance. The mental fog is the most insidious layer of the fatigue. It rolls in like the mist from the fields, obscuring thoughts, slowing reactions. The constant, repetitive motion of the horse, the sway, the dip, the rise, has acted as a powerful hypnotic agent. His mind begins to unspool. He finds himself staring at the back of the horse's neck, at a single wet lock of mane, and realizing that he has lost 10 minutes of time. He cannot remember the last turn in the road. He cannot remember passing the last marker stone. There is only the gray blur, the sound of the rain, and the sway. He blinks, and the eyelids feel like they are made of lead. They slide down over his eyes with a delicious, heavy slowness, shutting out the slit of the world. For a second, just a fraction of a second, he is floating. The pain in the shoulders recedes into a warm hum. The darkness is total and comforting. Then the horse stumbles on a root, a small jerk, and he snaps back. The eyes fly open, gritty and dry. The visor slit reappears. The panic of the lapse flares in his chest. A small, cold spark, before being smothered again by the exhaustion. He shakes his head inside the helmet, a small, rattling movement, trying to dislodge the sleep that clings to him like cobwebs. The shadows in the woods are playing tricks now. The brain, starved of clear visual data, begins to invent. A twisted branch becomes the arm of a waiting archer. A dark bush becomes a crouching beast. He stares at them, heart rate rising slightly, until the horse draws closer and the illusion collapses back into wet bark and leaves. He is too tired to be truly afraid. He simply observes these phantoms with a detached curiosity, watching them form and dissolve in the gloom. They are just part of the dreamscape of the march, the hallucinations of a mind that has been enclosed in steel for too long. The silence of the evening is profound. The wind has died down, leaving the forest in a state of suspended stillness. The birds have long since taken shelter. There is no rustle of small animals in the brush. The only sound is the wet, squelching impact of the hooves on the mud, a sound that has become deeper and wetter as the light fails. Squelch, thud, squelch, thud. It is a heavy, mournful rhythm. It sounds like the earth itself is sighing under the weight of the iron men passing over it. He shifts his weight in the saddle, a microscopic adjustment that offers no relief. The breastplate is cold against his chest, a slab of ice that has leached the heat from his core. He can feel the exact outline of the metal plate on his torso. He is a man made of parts held together by rivets and straps, and the parts are failing. The desire to simply stop, to slide off the horse and lie down in the mud, is a physical pull, almost magnetic. To let the armor take him down, to let the earth hold the weight, to close the eyes and let the darkness win. But the horse keeps moving. The animal is tired too. He can feel the change in its gait, the head drooping lower, the steps becoming heavier. They are a single entity of exhaustion moving through the tunnel of the trees. The light is almost gone now. The slit in the visor is a dark blue line. The world is disappearing, leaving him alone inside the shell. He listens to his own breath. The hush of the air against the metal, slow and ragged. The ache of the evening is not sharp. It is broad and deep. It is the accumulation of every drop of rain, every jolt of the saddle, every minute of the vigil. It is a heavy blanket that wraps around his bones, slowing his pulse, weighing down his thoughts. He is moving, but he is already halfway to sleep, held upright only by the rigid embrace of the steel that surrounds him. The road stretches on into the dark, and he rides into it, a silent, aching ghost in the machine. The rhythmic, squelching cadence of the march finally breaks, dissolving not into a sudden halt, but into a slow, staggering cessation of movement as the horse comes to a stop. The animal lets out a long, shuddering breath, a sound that vibrates through the saddle and into the night's weary frame. They have reached the clearing, a designated patch of flattened earth where the mud is slightly less deep and where a fire has already been kindled by those who arrived earlier. The light of the flames flickers in the distance, a warm, dancing orange that cuts through the blue, black gloom of the evening. It is a beacon, not of victory, but of rest. The knight sits motionless for a moment longer, delaying the inevitable effort of dismounting. His body has molded to the shape of the saddle, his muscles locked in a rigid embrace with the leather and wood. To move is to break the cast. He gathers the heavy, wet reins in one hand and swings his leg over the animal's rump. The motion is stiff, a lever pivoting on a rusted fulcrum. He drops to the ground. Thud. The impact is jarring. The earth is soft, but the weight of the armor multiplies the force, sending a shockwave up through the soles of his sabatons, rattling the bones of his ankles and knees. He staggers slightly, his legs feeling foreign and clumsy after hours of suspension. He is heavy. He is impossibly heavy. Standing on his own 2 feet, the full burden of the iron suit presses down on his spine, a crushing gravity that seeks to pull him into the mud. He takes a step, and his boot sinks, the mud claiming him with a wet, sucking sound. He walks toward the fire, each step a deliberate, monumental effort. He reaches the circle of light and stops near a log that serves as a bench. It is time. The ritual of construction that began in the gray dawn must now be reversed. The deconstruction begins. He raises his hands to his helmet. The gauntlets scrape against the steel bowl, a sound like stones grinding together. He finds the latch at the gorget, his fingers numb and clumsy, fumbling with the cold metal mechanism. It resists, stiff with grit and cold. Before giving way with a sharp snap, he grips the sides of the helmet and lifts. The weight slides upward. For a second, the pressure intensifies on his forehead, then release. The steel shell pulls free from his head. The sensation is overwhelming. The air of the forest rushes in to fill the vacuum, cool and shockingly fresh. It washes over his sweaty, matted hair, touching his forehead and ears with a delicacy that feels almost violent after the sensory deprivation of the helmet. The sounds of the camp explode into clarity. The crackle of the burning wood is crisp and sharp. The murmur of voices is distinct. The wind in the trees is no longer a muffled drone, but a complex, layered symphony of rustling leaves. He blinks, his eyes watering as they adjust to the lack of a frame. The peripheral vision returns, widening the world from a narrow slit to a panoramic expanse of shadows and firelight. He places the helmet on the log. It sits there, dark and hollow, staring back at him with its empty eye slit. He runs a hand through his damp hair, his fingers reveling in the direct contact with his own scalp. Next, the gauntlets. He pulls at the fingertips of the right glove with his left hand. The leather clings to his skin, suctioned by moisture. He pulls harder. Squelch. The hand slides out. It is pale, the skin wrinkled and soft from being encased in the humid leather for 12 hours. He flexes his fingers, watching the tendons move under the skin. They feel light, airy, as if they could float away. He repeats the process with the left hand. He rubs his palms together, the friction generating a small, dry warmth that has nothing to do with steel. He reaches for the buckles of the pauldrons. The straps are wet and swollen, difficult to unthread. He works them loose with patience he didn't know he had left. The shoulder plates fall away, clattering onto the pile. The relief is instant. The yoke that has been crushing his trapezius muscles is gone. His shoulders drop an inch, the muscle spasms easing into a dull, throbbing ache. He rotates his arms, hearing the soft popping of the joints, feeling the blood rush back into the constricted capillaries. Now, the breastplate. The central fortification. He finds the straps under his arms. The leather is slick with oil and rain. He pulls the tongue of the buckle. Creak. The strap comes free. The front plate detaches from the back plate. He leans forward, letting the heavy slab of steel slide from his chest. The expansion is immediate. His lungs, confined for hours within the rigid cage, suddenly have room to move. He takes a breath, a true, deep, diaphragm-filling breath. The ribs expand, stretching the intercostal muscles, pushing out against nothing but the soft resistance of the gambesson. He holds the air, savoring the volume of it, feeling the oxygen flood his system. The dizziness of the fatigue recedes slightly. He exhales a long, shuddering sigh that seems to carry the weight of the day out of his body. The cool night air hits the damp linen of his gambesson, chilling the sweat that has soaked it. But even this chill is welcome. It is the feeling of being exposed, of being human again. He sits heavily on the log. The change in altitude relieves his back. He reaches down to his legs. The sabatons are unstrapped and pulled off, revealing woolen hose that are dark with sweat. Then the greaves. Then the heavy chainmail chausses. He unties the points that hold the mail to his belt. The heavy metal leggings slide down his legs, pooling around his ankles like molten iron. He kicks them away. His legs are light. They feel strange, almost insubstantial, as if they might float up from the ground. He rubs his shins, feeling the deep indentations left by the straps and the texture of the mail. The skin is red and angry, marked with the map of his armor. He traces the lines with his thumb, massaging the blood back into the compressed tissue. Finally, he stands up to remove the hauberk, the heavy shirt of chainmail. He bends at the waist, grabbing the hem of the mail, and pulls it over his head. It is a final, heavy struggle, a wrestling match with gravity. The rings slide over his gambesson, a cascading rush of metal. He flings it onto the pile. He is stripped down to his padded undergarment. The gambesson is stained dark with sweat in the armpits and down the back. It steams in the cold night air. A faint white mist rising from his shoulders as the heat of his body escapes. He fumbles with the laces at the front of the jacket, his fingers tired but dexterous enough. He loosens them, letting the thick quilt fall open. The cool air touches his bare throat and chest. He shivers, but it is a good shiver. It is the shiver of temperature, not of exhaustion. He peels the gambesson off, his arms sliding out of the heavy sleeves. He is left in his thin linen shirt and hose. He stands by the fire, a man of flesh and bone once more. The armor lies in a heap on the ground, a disjointed skeleton of steel that looks like a fallen soldier. He looks at it, and he feels a strange separation. That thing on the ground is what the world sees. This shivering, aching man standing in the smoke is the truth. The smell of the oil is fading, replaced by the scent of the wood smoke from the fire. It is an ancient, comforting smell. It smells of warmth, of food, of survival. He stretches his arms high above his head, his spine cracking in 3 places. He twists his torso, feeling the muscles lengthen. The phantom weight of the armor still lingers. He moves with a caution that is no longer necessary, anticipating a resistance that is not there. But the reality of the release is settling in. He runs a hand over his face, feeling the roughness of his beard and the deep impressions left by the helmet liner on his forehead. They are tender to the touch. He looks at the fire, watching the flames lick at the wood, mesmerizing and chaotic. He is no longer a tower of iron. He is soft. He is vulnerable. And in this vulnerability, standing in the damp grass with the smoke curling around him, he finally feels the day truly end. The release is complete. The burden has been laid down. Now, only the earth awaits. The fire is a living thing, a small, contained sun that breathes and dances in the center of the camp. It has burned down now to a bed of glowing coals, pulsed with the occasional lick of orange flame that snaps at the air. The night stands before it, watching the transformation of wood into heat, mesmerized by the simple, destructive chemistry of the burning. The light paints his face in shifting hues of amber and gold, casting long, flickering shadows behind him that stretch out into the darkness of the trees. He is warm on his front, the heat soaking into his linen shirt, finding the skin that was so recently encased in cold steel. It is a primitive comfort. This radiant warmth, a stark contrast to the damp chill that still clings to the forest beyond the circle of light. He turns slowly away from the fire to prepare his bed. There is no mattress here, no straw tick, no wooden frame. There is only the earth. He unrolls his blanket, a heavy, dark square of coarse wool that has seen as many miles as he has. He spreads it out on the ground, smoothing the wrinkles with his hand. The ground is uneven, a topography of tree roots, stones, and packed soil, softened only slightly by a layer of damp, fallen leaves. He feels the texture of the terrain through the wool, mapping the surface with his palm, finding the hollows that will cradle his hips and the ridges he must avoid. It is a hard bed, but it is solid. It does not sway like the horse. It does not shift. It is the foundation of the world, waiting to receive him. He lowers himself down. The movement is a controlled collapse. First a knee, then a hand, then the hip. He rolls onto the blanket, and the earth rises up to meet him. Thump. The contact is immediate and absolute. The ground is hard, unyielding, and utterly supportive. There is no give, no bounce. As he stretches out his legs, he feels the soil pressing back against his calves, his thighs, his spine. It is a sensation of being anchored. After a day of being suspended in the saddle, of balancing against the motion of the beast and the wind, this stability is a profound relief. The earth holds him still. He pulls the edge of the blanket over him, tucking it under his chin. The wool is scratchy, smelling of smoke and horses, but it traps the heat of his body instantly. He lies on his back, staring up. The canopy of the trees above is a lace work of black branches against a night sky that is cleared enough to reveal a few faint, distant stars. They are cold, white pinpricks of light, watching from an unimaginable distance. He traces the shape of a branch with his eyes, following its twist and turn until it disappears into the dark. His body feels heavy, but it is a different kind of heaviness than before. It is not the external, crushing weight of the iron plates. It is an internal gravity, a leaden sinking of the muscles and bones. Now that the armor is gone, his body seems to have doubled in density. His arms, resting by his sides, feel as if they are sinking through the blanket and into the soil. His legs are logs of wood, inert and motionless. The phantom sensation of the male still lingers. A ghostly compression around his chest, a shadow of the greaves on his shins. But it is fading, washing away with every beat of his heart. He turns his head to the side, his cheek pressing against the rough texture of the blanket. Through the low flames of the fire, he sees his armor. It lies in a heap where he left it, a dark, metallic mound. The helmet sits atop the pile. The firelight catching the curve of the steel and the dark line of the visor. It looks lifeless, a hollow shell that has been discarded. It is over there, and he is here. The separation is physical and complete. The metal has no power over him now. It is just cold iron, waiting for the morning. He looks at it with a detached affection, acknowledging the burden it carries, but grateful that, for these few hours, he does not have to carry it. The sounds of the camp are settling into a nocturnal rhythm. The horses are asleep, their breathing heavy and slow, occasionally shifting a hoof in the mud with a soft squelch. The fire pops, a sudden, sharp crack, sending a shower of sparks spiraling upward into the smoke. He watches one spark rise, glowing bright red, climbing higher and higher, until it cools and vanishes into the night air. The wind has dropped to a whisper, a gentle breeze that brushes the tops of the pines, creating a sound like the ocean, a rhythmic sha-ah that washes over the clearing. His breathing slows. It syncs with the slow pulse of the dying fire. Inhale, the chest rises, free and unencumbered. Exhale. The body sinks deeper into the earth. The air is cool on his face, tasting of damp leaves and wood smoke. It is a clean taste. He closes his eyes. The darkness behind his lids is not empty. It is filled with the afterimages of the fire, warm orange swirls that dance and fade. His mind begins to loosen its grip. The vigilance of the day, the constant scanning of the horizon, the alertness to every sound. It all begins to dissolve. The thoughts that have occupied him for hours, the rust on the grave, the ache in the shoulder, the miles to go, fragment and drift away like smoke. He tries to hold on to a thought about the route for tomorrow, but it slips through his fingers, replaced by the sensory reality of the moment. The warmth, the hardness of the ground, the smell of the wool. A deep fatigue rolls over him, a warm, heavy tide that starts at his feet and moves upward. It fills his legs, his torso, his arms. It wraps around his neck and settles in his head. It is a permission. Permission to stop. Permission to let go. The tension in his jaw releases. The furrow in his brow smooths out. The hands, which have gripped reins and sword hilts all day, curl into soft, open shapes. He is no longer a knight. He is no longer a soldier. He is simply a warm, breathing creature resting on the surface of the earth. The ground absorbs his weight, the blanket absorbs his warmth, and the night absorbs his consciousness. The barrier between the man and the world has dissolved. He drifts, floating on the edge of the deep, dark water of sleep. The fire crackles one last time, a soft, comforting sound that whispers that he is safe, he is warm, and the watch is ended. He sinks, down, down, into the quiet, heavy, the dreamless dark. The torches flicker. The corridor quiets. A gentle breeze brushes the stones. The world slows down to a single, steady heartbeat. The silence is not empty, it is full of peace. The journey is paused. The burden is down. The light dims gently into nothingness. Now take a deep breath, and may you have a peaceful sleep.